Okay, hello everyone, and we're live. Welcome to the next Daring Talk edition on today's webinars. As you may see or hear, one of the differences is that we're having today's webinar in English, and the reason for that is that we're having a very special guest with us, who's Mindaugas Mozūras, Head of Engineering at Vinted. For those that don't know Vinted, it's a second-hand fashion marketplace that enhances sustainability. And I'm sure Mindaugas will tell you a bit more about the market itself in a second. Before we go into the topic of presentation, for those that are with us for the first time, a couple of words about us, the IT, and what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. So basically, we're a social business that strives to increase the representation of women in IT at every step of the way of their career, while solving the IT industry's talent gap problem at the same time. We do that through cooperation with many different companies, but also we run a mentoring program for women, an active community both on Facebook and Slack, bi-weekly newsletter, and a lot of many different educational activities, such as this one that we're having today with Mindaugas. So follow us on social media. Remember to subscribe to YouTube, and hope to see you soon at our next webinars. We're super happy to welcome today Mindaugas. The topic that he will present, it's a very important one, not only for first-time managers or leaders, but basically for everyone that's interested in cultivating an ownership mindset among people around him or her. So again, very exciting to have you here. Super happy to listen to this topic, and the floor is yours. And one quick disclaimer, as always, you can ask questions to those listening as we go, and also at the end of the webinar. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and I'm very happy to be here giving this talk about how to cultivate leadership in others. So before I go into the content of the talk, let me give you some more details about myself. So I'm head of engineering at Vinted, and in the past, I've also founded a couple of meetups. The first one I co-founded was Vilnius.js. The leadership of this meetup is now in better hands, but these days I run another meetup called Vilnius Tech Leads. I've created Vilnius Tech Leads to solve a problem of my own. I wanted to find technical leaders to talk to and share experience with. Vilnius Tech Leads has more than 2,600 members in its community, and we had 27 meetups in total throughout the years. I also love to give back to the software engineering community. I used to write a lot more code, and when I did, some of it was open source. The project that I'm most proud of is Pronto. It has almost 100 contributors and is now under an open source organization I founded called Pronto Labs. I've transferred the leadership to the organization to its now more active members. If by any chance you get bored during this talk, you can find me on the web, either on my blog on codingfearlessly.com or on social media as Mozūras. All the stories and insights I will share today will come from my experience at Vinted. I've been with Vinted for almost 9 years now. I've been leading engineering for 6 of them. Through those years, I've seen ups and downs. And you might be thinking, 9 years, that's quite a lot, Mindaugas. Aren't you just a little bit bored yourself? Isn't it time to look for another job? And to that, my answer is a clear no. Vinted has been at least 3 different companies through those 9 years. In the slide, you can see Vinted's history through those 9 years expressed in the number of transactions on our platform. And transaction happens at Vinted when an item is sold from a seller to a buyer. Through those 9 years, Vinted went through at least 3 distinct stages. The first stage that you can see here on the left, we were a fast-growing startup. When I first joined the company, we were working from a flat. It might not seem like we were fast growing from this slide, but we were growing 2x every year through those early years. The second stage that you can see here in the red, during this stage, we're struggling to find a working business model. Our growth was completely flat as we were trying different things to convert what we have into like a working business, an actual business. And the first stage is here on the right in green, is when we eventually found that working business model. And now we're growing really fast again. More than 25 million transactions happen every month on our platform. That's an average 10 items sold on our platform per second. And at Vinted, we have long-term ambitions. Thus, we're building a company in a way that ensures that people spend a long time at Vinted. You might be surprised, but I'm not the longest tenured employee at Vinted. With 9 years under my belt, I'm not even the longest tenured person in engineering. There are a couple of people in engineering that have spent more than 10 years now at Vinted. Today's presentation is partly inspired by a game I've played recently called Returnal. In this game, cosmic explorer Celine attempts to land on an off-limits planet on Atropos to investigate what she dubs as a white shadow signal. Upon arriving on that planet, her ship crashes, and unable to contact anyone, she tries to explore the planet and is shocked when she comes across a corpse of herself. She learns eventually that every time she dies, time seems to look back at the moment she crashed. I won't go deeper into the plot of the game, but that game is about learning information, becoming better, and tackling the challenges that seemed impossible a couple of hours ago. Throughout my years in leadership, I've participated in many one-on-ones. I have weekly one-on-ones with the people I lead and the engineering leadership team currently. I have one-on-ones with my boss, our CEO, Thomas Plantenga. Sometimes I have one-on-ones with my peers. And through the years, I've learned, became better, and tackled various challenges during one-on-ones. And to me, I looked at these one-on-ones through the lens of Celine from the game Returnal, where she's going through the same experience, but it's different every time, but she's learning new things along the way. In the same way, I would fail often, and gradually I became better. I hope that my failures will serve as a good learning tool for all of you. While I've had many one-on-ones and many failures, today I'm going to focus on only 5 of them. 5 stories of one-on-ones. So let's go to the first story. And first of all, I like to mix up my one-on-ones. Sometimes we do walk and talk one-on-ones. In Vinted's previous office in Giromone, that usually meant taking a stroll near the Neris River. That's where this first story occurs. At this point, the Vinted engineering team is much smaller than it is now, and there are more than 280 people in engineering now. But then it was less than 60. So it's me, an engineer and an engineering team lead taking a stroll near Neris. As during most of the one-on-ones, I ask questions like, how are you doing? What's happening in your team? What topics do you want to discuss today? And this team lead in the story has a couple of topics prepared, but there is one particular topic that's bothering him. Well, that's not unusual. In some of the one-on-ones, you spend most of your time on one specific, the most important topic. In this case, the primary topic is that one of the engineers on the team is not performing well. That engineer seems demotivated and unhappy about something. The team lead tells me about a couple of specific instances of how that unhappiness bubbled up. And you can probably imagine how that bubbling up happened and how it left other members of the team unhappy. So I listened for a while. I asked a couple of follow-up questions, and then a light bulb goes off in my head. In my mind, I go, I know exactly what to do. I've seen this pattern before, and I know how exactly to approach this. And I lay out a solution based on what I've heard. I tell how to approach that engineer, how to talk to him, and how to try and figure out this situation. Because that's what good leaders do, right? They help solve problems through their own experience and knowledge. Well, kind of right. The team lead listens to my advice, says that it's good advice. A couple of weeks later, we talk again, and surprise, surprise, my advice didn't work. At this point, where I'm sitting today, I'm not 100% sure on this detail, but I think that engineer in this story might have eventually even left the company, but I'm not 100% sure about this. I had multiple situations in the past where I've tried to solve problems myself as a leader for my team, not only by giving specific advice, but sometimes even by taking on the problems myself. Occasionally, it would work. Other times, it wouldn't work because I wouldn't be able to successfully follow up due to my other commitments. And even when it would work, it was not scalable, especially in a growing company like ours. So after this first story, I've learned that I need to do less myself and ensure that my team does more themselves. Because leadership is not about controlling our people. I specifically decided to use the quotes from this book called Call Sign Chaos by a very, very famous US General, Jim Mattis. Because when most of us think about the military, we imagine command and control type of leadership. The commander clearly states what and how needs to be done, and there's no discussion about it. But as these quotes clearly indicate, even in the military, that's not how it works. All of these three quotes talk about enabling people, but I especially want to highlight the second quote. You don't control your subordinate commander's every move. You clearly state your intent and unleash their initiative. And that's a good takeaway, right? Well, let's see how I'm going to mess it up in the second story. So let's go to the second story. So this story happens not near the Neris River. The second story takes place in Vinted's old office in Germany. Me and one of the team leads sit in one of the meeting rooms there. As in the first story, the team lead has a specific problem. Well, in this case, the team lead doesn't bring it up as a problem to solve. The team lead is just sharing what happened. And this time, it was not someone underperforming. It was a situation where we had an incident that caused a big part of our product to not work for a while. In my head, in this story, I imagined that the perfect solution would be a post-mortem with clear takeaways and follow-up actions. But in this story, I never state this intent. I never say it like that. I think that I've learned or so I think that from the first story and similar stories like it, instead of stating what I want to be done, I should ask open-ended questions and help the person arrive at the solution. So I ask open-ended questions. As you do as a leader, I ask for more specifics about what happened and what we're going to do next. The answers are okay, but the team lead does not arrive at the idea of a postmortem. Surprise, surprise. The time for the one-on-one is up, and I leave the one-on-one thinking to myself, well, he's smart. He'll figure it out. Everything's gonna be fine. You can probably guess on what happens next. Not surprising, we continue to have problems. The team figures it out eventually, but this kind of leadership I demonstrate in this story doesn't feel fully right to me either. So I overcorrected. When I first became a leader, I continued to do a lot of things myself. Then, when I understood, and you can see it in the first story, I understood that's not the right path. I overcorrected and started, well, kind of not doing enough. Well, I could even say not doing enough. A couple of slides ago, I have talked about a quote from Jim Mattis: "You don't control your subordinates' commanders' every move. You clearly state your intent and unleash their initiative." I only started doing the first thing, don't control, and didn't do enough of the second thing, stating my intent. Because to lead is to create clarity. Leading is not about being confront without knowing where you're going. Leading is about being confront, stating the direction. That's where we're going. And as Brent Brown, who wrote the book Dare to Lead, states, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. That's why also I partly believe that it is important, at least to some extent, for engineers to be led by people who understand engineering. Because to create clarity, you do sometimes need to go into details to understand those details and then help to create that clarity. So now I have this takeaway, and with this takeaway, I'm going to try, let's see how I'm going to do in the third story. And before I go into the story itself, this story also takes place in the same office in Germany. Again, me and a lead are sitting in one of the meeting rooms there. This time, the team lead comes to me with a situation that's been building up for a while. Their team has grown, and it's time to do something about it, because the team will soon be too big to function properly, because we need to split that team. This time, through the lessons learned from the previous stories, I strike a better balance, but as you will see, not at least in my eyes, not a perfect balance. So I start by reminding why and how we grow teams at Vinted. Instead of just building a new team from scratch, we build an existing team into double the size and then split that team as equally as possible. And equally meaning similar seniority in both teams and similar tenure in both teams. We try to have, after the split, two, at least to some extent, well-functioning teams. It's not perfect because it's still new teams, but seniority-wise, those teams should be okay, and both of the teams should have people who are familiar with how Vinted functions and would be able to relay that information to our team members. In this way, we also scale our culture in a better way. When you're building a new team from scratch, the culture also forms from scratch. So I say all these things to the team lead, and that's me defining my intent clearly. What I'm basically saying to him is that you have to have two fully well-functioning teams, and those teams should be as equal as possible in terms of seniority and tenure. The team lead understands that, and thanks me for reminding him that. I'm giving this example just to clearly show what I mean by stating my intent, because I'm not going into details into how that will happen exactly. We talk with the team lead about ways this can be achieved in his team, how that team lead can share this intent with the team, how that team lead can have one-on-ones with team members and ask for their preferences and build this in this way towards a decision on how those teams will be split. Because that's the hard part in this case, figuring out how exactly to split the team and which person will be on which team. And I purposefully leave the initiative up to the team lead. He knows his team much better than me and should be able to figure out how to engage his specific team in the best way for us to achieve this vision of two teams. And it's not like I'm not going to help him, walk him through some of the details, but I'm not trying to control him in any way, or I'm not suggesting specific ways on how he should approach specific people, because he knows those people best. So this is better than what I did in the first two stories, but we're not quite fully we're not quite fully there. Because in this case, the problem was that some of those conversations, some of those one-on-ones with team members, and some of the decisions that the team lead needed to take were not easy. Were not easy for that team. They required some mental toughness. So the solution, the actual split, took a while. So, and with this thought in mind, let me share a bit about Vinted's culture. At Vinted, we have 5 values, and all 5 are relevant in a leader's job. And for a leader, aiming high is about setting an ambitious vision. Then we have we co-create, which is about working as a team with your peers and enabling your team to co-create. We have we care, it's about being fully yourself and enabling others to be their fully integrated self. Growing is about helping growing yourself and helping your team grow. And in this talk, I want to specifically like to highlight the 5th one, taking ownership. Because leadership cannot exist without taking ownership. To be able to lead others, you have to accept the ownership and you show a direction, share your intent. But even that's not enough. To cultivate leadership in others, the key is to create accountability and cultivate that ownership mindset. And I failed to do it in this story because, as you saw from the story, as I said in the story, it took a while before the result happened. Let's see if I'm able to do better in the 4th story. So, the 4th story. This one takes place at the home, as it happened during the COVID-19 quarantine. That's me in this photo and one of our 2 cats. Since the time we have cats, I try to put at least one picture of them in my talks. That's the smaller one of our two cats. Now she's fully grown, but then she was quite small. But back to the story. Again, me and one of the leads are talking about what's happening, and the leader in this case plans to conduct a more difficult performance review of one of the people in their team. And this performance review will be more difficult because the person will not get any increase in their salary. I get a sense through the conversation that the lead might be looking for a way to avoid this kind of difficult conversation and might be looking for a way to give a salary raise for some reason. So at first, we talk a bit our overall compensation system. And that's how I state the intent, because it meant that there are two things we think about when we think about our compensation system. One is growth. As you could have noticed from our values, we value personal growth and learning. There's a practical reason we do, because we're a growing company. We want to continue being a growing company, and to continue being successful, we want each and everyone to learn, become better versions of themselves, and be ready to tackle those challenges of tomorrow. Thus, we don't have a system where each team has a budget and that budget needs to be divided among team members. Instead, each person is evaluated individually. Their stage of growth is determined, and their lead has the big say in that. And the second reason is that we want fairness. We want every person, including those we newly hired, to know that their salary is determined fairly and according to the same system. And of course, it doesn't mean that there aren't no discrepancies, but we're now a big company, so it's impossible for everyone to be fully calibrated. And thus, like, our system says a very simple thing, that your stage of growth determines your compensation. That's a really simple overarching idea. We have salary ranges associated with each stage, and where you are in that stage determines your compensation. So I tell all this to the team lead, and the lead understands this and agrees. It's not like he wasn't aware of that. It just serves as a good reminder. That's again me sharing my intent and the vision that we have at this company. Now we go back with him, with the team lead, with that leader, to the specific topic and that specific review. And I ask open questions and help the lead figure out how he's going to approach this review, while keeping the overall compensation principles in mind. I also ask the lead about when he plans to do it, and we agree on how he's going to follow up with me. So this time I'm creating some accountability, and at the same time helping the lead take ownership, because I'm not giving him the solution, I'm just giving him the principles, and he's owning the solution. Here's where I want to quote from another book, Radical Candor. This book's central idea is that a leader should care personally and challenge directly, and that these two are not in conflict with each other. And I've had situations as described by this quote. I didn't challenge my team directly. I didn't create accountability, which led me feeling bad towards the people I didn't challenge. And in the end, that's on me. This fourth story ended with a well-done review. No problems there, but one problem happened at the end. The only problem in this case was that my reaction to the successful result of the story was basically, yeah, okay. I did not care enough to celebrate the work that was well done. Now, I'm not saying that I should throw a party, but as a leader, I should be very clear when I see something as well done. Caring personally includes being happy for people when they succeed. The effect of me not caring enough about the success of my team is that the team gets demotivated. Before I go into the last fifth story, I really want to underline this idea of celebrating success. Let's go with this thought in mind to the fifth story. This story takes place in Vinted's new office. I'm sitting in this office right now, and me and one of the members of my team are talking in one of the meeting rooms, overlooking the same terrace. I actually can see this terrace right now, and this time we arrive at a problem that is a lack of technical policy. I won't go into details on what kind of policy this was specifically, but we need to make a decision, and we need to create this policy, and this particular person doesn't know how to make this decision. So I try to combine everything I've learned through these stories I've told you. First, I share my high-level vision and intent. I talk about how I want us to be practical and make technical choices with the long term in mind. I don't want us to chase shiny new technology just to have more people wanting to join us. No, we have to make the best decisions for our objectives as we understand it, and trust that great engineers will want to solve difficult problems well instead of wanting to work with shiny new tech. Next, after I declare this intent, with questions, I try to help the person figure out how to define that policy. Because again, that person is the best person to do it. And we don't define the policy during the one-on-one, but I help enough to figure out how to have a good start. Then finally I ask when that person will do it, and we agree on when they will follow up with me. It's time sensitive, as there are people stuck waiting for the decision to happen. Eventually, that person follow-ups with me. I'll look at that policy, and that policy makes me happy because it follows my intent. It was done in a timely way. And it's well defined, and it's really well written. There's no way that I could have done something half as well. So I express that happiness I feel inside, and make sure to clearly state what I like about how it was done. Like really give specific points of what I like about that policy and how it was done. And I'm still learning this point about celebration. I can honestly say that I'm not good at celebrating work well done. I think it's partly because I'm kind of tough on myself. My reaction when I'm successful at something is kind of muted. I care much more about when I fail instead of when I'm successful. Like I fear failure much more than I want to attain success. That might sound weird to some of you. Through my 2 years in therapy, my therapist helped me understand myself better, but it continues to be a journey. And the last point I want to make is that cultivating leadership starts with setting a leadership example worth following. To help people become better, all the leaders first need to become better humans themselves. And these were the 5 stories. Now let me try to connect it all into a whole. At Vilnius Tech Leads, our motto says that leadership is something you learn, not something you're born with. I truly believe that. So first, to cultivate leadership in others, the first and a critical element is to help people claim ownership. And this is done by, first of all, being clear about the overall intent and vision. But then by also creating accountability. As you've heard through my stories, this wasn't easy for me. It took me years until I'm now able to strike a better balance of being clear and unleashing the initiative in my team. And in no way I'm saying that there's no room for me to continue improving. Next, a very important part in cultivating leadership in others is feedback. As leaders ourselves, we have to bring our feedback with personal care, but we also be direct about it too. It took me a while to understand that I can be more direct and learn how to challenge my team directly in a way that still shows them that I care about them personally. That I'm not looking to be critical just to be critical, but I do it to genuinely help them, or at least try to help them. And finally, to cultivate leadership in others, we have to be open up about our own experience and set an example we're following, because leadership starts inside us. On a completely meta level, me giving this talk is an act of trying to cultivate leadership in others. I hope that you found my experience interesting, and I hope that sharing my own experience will help at least a few of you to be better leaders. I hope that I was at least a bit successful in trying to cultivate leadership in others through this talk. So thank you for listening, and I think now we're going to go into questions.
Yes, hello. Hello back again. I hope you can hear me, see me well. Thank you again for this talk. And we do have a question that came up during the conversation. But before I move to this question, I also have one that's been on my mind basically almost from the beginning of your talk. And one of them was that when you mentioned the story number 3, you've also emphasized how important it is actually to cultivate accountability, and why is it also an important part of basically creating ownership in others. And my question is, how do you go about creating this accountability? If you could share some practical tips on how do you make this happen within your team?
Yeah. So I think there are multiple ways how to do it, but in the end it boils down to agreements and that following up on those agreements. And usually agreements are time related, so you agree that something will be done by that time, and then you follow up on that agreement when the time is up, and if it's not done, you want to know why. I think in the end, accountability boils down to just agreements and following up on those agreements. And there can be many forms of how to do it. It can be written agreements, agreements expressed in words, roadmaps are agreements in a sense, etc.
Okay, so to bring it up to basic level, for example, you have a weekly follow-up on the progress for a given element, or you agree that by X date someone will deliver XYZ, so then you can follow up if that wasn't happened. So basically this kinds of elements. Okay, yeah. Cool. One of the questions within the community that we had to do with in general leadership. As you mentioned before, it seems that you learned the best way to run one-on-one by trial and error, as we can clearly see for the progress of your let's say, journey and that matter. How do you have any suggestions on how this learning can be accelerated and some mistakes can be avoided for new leaders? Is there anything you'd like to add to what you just said?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, it was a lot of trial and error. I think that's inescapable. You just need to have that practical experience, and that practical experience will happen, and you're going to make errors, and then you're going to learn from them. But it was not just that. I also had mentors. I also read a couple of useful books. A couple of those I've mentioned in this talk. I watch talks. So I think there are a lot of, especially in this internet world, there are a lot of resources that we can use to learn more about how to do these things better. I think the most useful to me was having peers who I can talk to about how to do these things.
Okay, so basically using some of the experience shared within the company. Were those mentors at your company, or were you reaching out to them through some other channels?
Both. So I was lucky to have a couple of people in my company who I could really learn from. But I also reached out to people outside of my company. Specifically in my role as head of engineering, I don't have another head of engineering that I can talk to inside the company. So there are topics that I just need to discuss with leaders from other companies.
Okay, as you know, in Darity, we're very big on finding and growing mentors. So it's great to hear and also emphasize the fact that your search for a mentor, having mentors doesn't stop basically at a certain level of career, but basically as you grow and progress, your mentors just get, let's say, more advanced or helpful in certain, or even more helpful in certain situations. If there are any other questions that those watching us now would like to ask, just please write them in the comments up right. In the meantime, one other thing that I would like to ask, which is also a constant struggle for me as a manager and leader in design, is that you've mentioned that a lot of times being a leader is really not about solving others' problem. It's more about asking the right question, as you mentioned, stating the intent, and then see them execute or see them come up, take the initiative with certain solution. What I'm struggling with, and I'm very interested or curious to hear your opinion, is how do you deal with situations where you clearly stated your intent, you're building accountability and want someone to take ownership, but then you see that the solution proposed or the initiative taken isn't really the correct, let's say, direction that you know should be taken, or that there is a more optimal way. At which point do you intervene or take over, so to speak?
So there is this concept of situational leadership, and you can read more about it, but it basically boils down to the idea that with more junior people, you need to stay closer to them, follow up more often, help them more, and with more senior people, you can leave them for a week or two and then come back, and you can be calm that they're gonna do a good job. So I think that no two situations are the same. So you as a leader, you need to learn how to figure out what kind of situation you're in, how senior the person is. Maybe that person is new at a company, and with someone new at a company, you want to stay closer to them and follow up more often. So I think it really depends on the situation, but I would just thinking about your specific example, I would tell the feedback as soon as I would see that something is wrong. And if it's someone more junior, I would try to follow up with them more often than, let's say, I would with a more senior person.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful to me. And I guess that it's also this, I think it's also this challenge of, as you mentioned, challenging directly people and giving more direct feedback, which I assume is also sometimes hard. One of the questions we got from Patricia Pau as you were speaking was, and what if you're new to the organization or change the branch of the market? I'm not 100% sure I understand the question.
My guess is that change the branch of the market means like moving from design to engineering, right? But I'm not sure what is the context of this question.
Yeah, Patricia, if you could maybe clarify the question, that would help us a bit more to answer it correctly. And another question we got from Natalie is, do you have some tips on how to safely test the things you read about or hear about from mentors? Which I think is a pretty good question.
Well, safely test. Yeah, so what I do is that, well, let me give a specific example. So celebrating success of others, it's a bit more difficult for me. So I first started doing it with people that are new to the organization. So people who know me a bit less and wouldn't think that how I'm acting is unnatural. So that's one tactic. I use. But I think in the end, like, you're still doing it with other people, so it's not fully safe. One other thing I used occasionally is just role play with mentors. So sometimes it can work, but I think that's definitely a thing that you have to have in your toolbox. Just role play certain situations, and I've role played like specific situations with my lead or with other people when for example I wanted to give a more difficult performance review. I wanted to walk through that performance review during a role play situation and just be challenged on certain things on how I would say them.
Okay, I think that was, I mean, at least for me, that was a very helpful technique. Natalie, if you have any additional questions or comments, please let me know. Also, Patricia, if you want to clarify your question so that we can answer it, that would be also very helpful. Or if there are any other questions about cultivating leadership here, also write them up. In the meantime, what I would like to do is actually thank also our patrons that support Dare IT. So again, many thanks to all of those who also make it more possible for us to create these initiatives and yeah, basically work again. And as for this webinar, since I do see at least for now any questions appearing, thank you so much again, Mindaugas, for taking the time and sharing your experience, especially based on true stories. I think that those are also the most practical ones. So we're super excited to have you here and hope to see you again within our community again.
Oh, thank you. It was nice to be here. I hope that our paths will cross in the future. I would love to participate in your future events.
Okay, that would be amazing. And as we were talking, basically saying our goodbyes, Patricia wrote another element saying, what I meant is the complete context change. But here again, I'm not sure if that's a complete context change of leadership or the situation.
Yeah, it's still hard for me to guess at what the question is exactly.
Okay. Anyways, Patricia, feel free to write me up after the webinar, and then maybe we can come up with a more, let's say, precise answer on the matter. And then again, thank you everyone to those watching, and also again, Mindaugas, for being here, and hope to see you soon in the future. Thanks. You. Have a good afternoon. Bye.